U.S. President Joe Biden has made a bold promise to make Qatar a major non-NATO ally of the U.S. Biden made the pledge as he met with Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad al-Thani at the White House. Al-Thani is the first Gulf leader to meet President Biden since he took office last year. Many are also looking to Qatar, one of the world's largest supplier of liquefied natural gas, as a potential solution to Russian energy. Hadia Al-Alawi has more.
The first meeting between the US and Qatar's leaders came with a host of issues on the agenda, including security, investment, and ensuring the stability of global energy supplies. Growing fears of a military confrontation with Russia leading to supply disruption is forcing the West to look for alternative options to meet natural gas needs. Qatar is the second biggest liquefied natural gas exporter after the US, but it's already producing at full capacity. Most of its supplies are under contract to Asia, meaning it could only provide limited assistance should it be needed.
Emir and I have a lot on our agenda today, and we want to talk about the security in the Gulf and the broader Middle East, ensuring the stability of global energy supplies, continuing our work together to support the people of Afghanistan, and strengthening commercial and investment cooperation between our two countries.
The US and Europe have threatened severe sanctions if Russia invades Ukraine. Retaliation from Moscow could mean a disruption of oil and gas flows. Concerns about global shortages have pushed prices to record high levels. Russia, which supplies about 40% of Europe's natural gas, reduced its exports by about 25% in the last quarter of 2021. Moscow says it has no intention of invading Ukraine and has dismissed concerns it could cut off Europe.
With Russia is continuing its buildup of its forces around Ukraine, we are ready no matter what happens.
The US wants a contingency plan, which may include turning to its regional ally Qatar. Biden has designated Qatar as a major non-NATO ally, a status afforded to countries that have strategic working relationships with the US military. It allows greater access to security systems and training by US defense forces.
We demonstrated that how solid and how strong we can work together and cooperate on what we did in Afghanistan. We're very proud that we managed to evacuate tens of thousands of people of Afghanistan.
Qatar has been representing the US in talks with the Taliban since November. The country also hosts the US military's central command in the region and has enjoyed closer relationships with the Biden administration, a stark contrast to its turbulent relationship with his predecessor Donald Trump. These could become key factors if Washington is forced to lean on Doha in the near future. Hadia Al-Alawi, Strait Talk.
And to discuss what potential role Qatar could play in possible energy crisis, joining me now from Berlin is Thomas O'Donnell. He's a lecturer at the Hertie School of Governance. And from London, Tom Marzec-Manser. He is the head of gas analytics at ICIS, an energy data company. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Thomas, al-Thani is the first Gulf leader to meet Biden since his election. What could you tell us about the significance and the timing of this visit?
There's many reasons, of course, that the United States is close to Qatar. We could talk about Afghanistan, we could talk about the Middle East and other things. But right now, it's quite obvious. Quite likely, there will be a war in Ukraine. This is what the Americans and NATO believes. When there's a war in Ukraine, the problem is Russia is the main supplier of gas to Europe. And already they've reduced their supplies by 1/3. And there's an energy crisis in Europe. There's a shortage of natural gas. They could run out. And if a war starts, and they cut back more. So Qatar can provide LNG as well as the United States. That has to be worked out. Qatar has interests here. My understanding, they've asked that the LNG not be sold beyond Europe. And they're going to try to make LNG available that wouldn't normally be made available. And these are the discussions that are going on. The Americans are trying to prevent or to lessen the impact of a Russian-induced gas crisis, weaponization of gas in Europe.
Okay, so Tom, the White House readout of the meeting did not specifically mention the Ukraine crisis or Europe's gas dependence on Russia, but it did make a reference to global energy supply. So can Qatar come to Europe's energy rescue in the event of a crisis? Can it avert a possible energy crisis Europe is likely to face in the event of a war?
The thing to bear in mind is that a lot of Qatar's LNG that's sold around the world is tied up in long-term contracts. So they will have some flexibility in sending additional volumes into Europe should they be required. But that's not a great deal of that flexibility. And in fact, what it will really depend upon is whether buyers in Japan and Korea and Taiwan are happy to take less than they might normally do in, say, in February and March. So if they are, and it's possible they are, we're seeing some reduced lower levels of demand in that region for this time of the year than normal, then Qatar could have extra gas to sell. Let's be clear, this is gas to sell. It will be a price response as much as anything else, though. And Europe's had a high price recently. It's absorbed a lot of extra LNG recently. January 2022 was the Europe's largest LNG import month ever, according to ICIS data, up by a few million tons versus the previous record. So it's likely Qatar can help solve part of the problem. It probably can't be solve all of the problem.
So, Thomas, what's your take on that? Even if a short-term solution to make it through the winter is found, how would the long-term outcome look like? Could it replace a full Russian cutoff?
No, if there is a full cutoff, and I'm talking, it is possible, war is war, and I don't care what your scenarios are, nobody can say what might happen. If Nord Stream 1 got cut off, if Turk Stream got cut off, and other sources got cut off from Russia, both the United States and Qatar together could not supply enough LNG to really get Europe out of the hole. The problem is Europe is in a deep hole to begin with. For various reasons, last year they ran down the reserves. Yes. And that has to do with poor planning on their part, but Russia has refused to help to fill the reserves. So they're at the edge already. A full cutoff, they could help, but there's no way to really replace that amount of gas. But there has been something like 4 or 5 major energy crises that have affected Europe deeply since World War II. In every single case, it was the Americans who came and tried and resolved the crisis and addressed the issues. This reflects the fact that the United States is not only a superpower, it's actually, how should I say, it's one of the main powerhouses in the world as far as producing energy itself.
So, Tom, whether a war breaks out or not, Europeans will be looking to decouple from Russia and diversify their sources and maybe think of a new strategy?
I think if Russia was to stop its flows entirely to Europe, and I think that's a highly unlikely scenario, but it's one that the Americans are rightly making contingency plans for. But if that were to happen, I think it would accelerate the European Union's plans to further decarbonize at a faster rate, to increase its investment in renewables further, and maybe to look at other sources of supply, alternative sources of supply, to bring in gas while we move through that transition. In the short term, there is very little the European Union can do not to be dependent upon Russian gas, regardless of which route it takes, whether it comes through Nord Stream 2, through Ukraine, or through the Polish-Belarusian route, for that matter. So,
Thomas, how would a complete gas cutoff and harsher sanctions on Russia impact the global economy, which is still reeling from the negative effects of the COVID-19?
Yes. Well, these problems, these energy problems, are already having an impact on the recovery in Europe, and they would. It's difficult to say. It also depends on how bad the weather is the next few weeks and how much wind blows. Because Europe has gotten so overly dependent in a sense, without properly preparing on renewables. So this could be it is possible if we go to the limit, as Tom says, it's one of the scenarios, one of the lesser likely scenarios, that a complete cutoff of Russian gas, but the crisis would be something. We have to think back to 1973 or something like that, those energy crises, or 1979. It could be very severe considering the economy of Europe. It's very difficult to say.
So, Tom, could Russia afford losing its most lucrative clients over Ukraine, or could Germany risk the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which it has been building with the Russians despite the American backlash? Give us some German approach here.
I think from a German perspective, again, talking about that energy transition, it's turned off a load of coal-fired plants. It's turned off a lot of nuclear power stations just at the turn of the new year. It needs to heavily invest in gas-fired generation to support its renewable growth, and therefore, it is clear that the German economy needs more gas in the medium term. So making sure that gas flows, be it through Nord Stream 2 or through Ukraine or through other routes, is really important to keep that engine of Europe going. And from a Russian perspective, we talk about there's been a lot of talk about Russia turning its head east to supply other markets, particularly China. Well, the orders of magnitude in terms of what Russia can and could supply to China is still quite insignificant compared to what it's.
So, Thomas, let's say after Crimea's annexation in 2014, could this latest crisis be construed as a second wake-up call for the Europeans? And why do you think Germany is out of step with the US and Europe, or rather acting reluctantly?
I like your analogy about the wake-up call. This is sort of like the kids who hear the alarm clock again and again and don't get up for school. It's not a matter of another wake-up call. We talk about different people, okay? If I can talk about Germany, I'm sitting here in Berlin. One section of the German elite, and it happens to be the Chancellor's party right now, the Social Democratic Party, has for decades had this politics of Ostpolitik. They want to have energy trade, maximum energy trade with Russia for various reasons. They say that's going to bring peace. Well, obviously it doesn't bring peace, this dependency, and it bring reliability. But there are others who are very ideologically driven, more so than most European countries, and I would say like the Green Party is an example, but other parties have agreed with this. Shutting off 17 nuclear plants that were paid for, that were producing zero carbon, and somehow this is as dangerous as global warming. This was ideologically driven. Merkel and other parties did not like this, but they went along with it for social peace and for election results. And now they've got themselves in a hole. And as Tom has pointed out, they want to build now the answer of the super energy minister we have now, environmental minister from the Green Party. He says we have to cover 2% of the entire territory of Germany with windmills. Of course, the windmills don't always turn, and therefore the SPD says we're happy to bring gas from Russia to replace this. And they've gotten themselves in this bind. This is ideologically driven. The Americans have warned them repeatedly about this, Democrats and Republicans, that you're making Europe and your country, the biggest economy, dependent on Russia, and you're doing ideologically driven things with renewables.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. It was a pleasure having you on Straight Talk.